These storms have been crazy. They've been absolutely insane. I've not seen anything like it here, like ever. But so many people in the videos that I made were like, this is like nothing compared to 1978. That storm was just insane. It was way worse. And I can't imagine it being any worse than what we've seen. So I just have to find out.
February 1978. The world was a different place. Jimmy Carter was in the White House. The Bee Gees were topping the charts with Stayin' Alive, a title that would take on a grim irony in just a few days. It was an era of heavy steel cars, rear-wheel drive, and no traction control. There were no cell phones to check the radar, no 24-hour weather apps to scream warnings in your pocket. You had the morning paper, the AM radio, and the gray sky above you. It started as a Monday like any other. February 6th, in the Ohio Valley and across New England, the alarm clocks rang in the dark. The coffee brewed in percolators. Millions of Americans buttoned up their wool coats.
What's a percolator? Is that like a kettle, like a coffee maker?
Scraped the frost off their windshields and headed out. The forecast called for snow, typical for February. But nobody, not the weathermen, not the government, and certainly not the commuters merging onto the interstates, knew what was actually coming. They didn't know that two massive, historic weather systems were hurtling toward a collision point. One was a cold, dry Arctic blast diving down from Canada, a hammer made of ice. The other was a warm, wet moisture plume surging up from the Gulf of Mexico. They were destined to meet over the Ohio Valley and explode into a meteorological bomb.
Oh my
The barometric
God.
pressure was about to crash to levels usually seen only in Category 3 hurricanes.
Jesus.
By evening, the world they knew, the street signs, the fences, the familiar roads home, would be gone. The enemy wasn't a foreign army. It was the wind.
Oh my
It was
God.
the ice. And for the next week, America would be under siege by the White Hurricane. The storm didn't announce itself with a roar. It began with a lie. In many places, the morning of February 6th started with rain. It was a cold, miserable drizzle that lulled people into a false sense of security. Rain meant it was warm enough. Rain meant the roads were wet, not slick. It felt manageable. It felt routine. People looked out their office windows at 10 a.m. and saw gray, slushy streets. They thought about dinner. They thought about the weekend. They didn't think about survival. But the trap was already closing. Around midday, the temperature didn't just drop. It plunged off a cliff. Within an hour, the rain turned to sleet, peppering the windows like buckshot. Then the sleet turned to snow. But this wasn't the fluffy, romantic Christmas snow. This was heavy, wet, concrete snow. And then came the wind. The wind didn't gust. It screamed. It sustained speeds of 50, 60, then 70 miles per hour.
Oh
In
my
coastal
God.
New England, gusts hit 100 miles per hour. It was a hurricane with a wind chill of 50 below zero. The transition was so violent that the National Weather Service couldn't update the forecasts fast enough. People in Cleveland and Boston reported their ears popping, the physical pressure of the atmosphere collapsing around them. The rain that had fallen in the morning flash froze into a sheet of black ice,
Oh
and on
my
top of that
God.
ice, the snow began to pile up at a rate of 3, 4, sometimes 5 inches an hour. The deception was over. The ambush had begun. The trap sprung.
5 inches of snow an hour is crazy. That's like that much snow in an hour, every hour. Wow.
In the early afternoon. This is where the story of 1978 turns from a weather event into a battlefield. Because it was a Monday, the schools were full, the factories were running, the offices were busy, and when the sky turned black and the snow began to blind the windows, everyone made the same decision at the same time. I need to get home. Millions of cars flooded the highways simultaneously. The result was catastrophic. On Route 128, the beltway around Boston, the traffic slowed to a crawl. Then it stopped, and then it was
no.
buried. This wasn't a traffic jam.
Oh
It was a
my
mass
God.
casualty event in slow motion. The snow was falling so fast that the plows were rendered useless. A plow would clear a lane, and 5 minutes later, it was impassable again.
Crazy.
Drivers sat in their idling cars, watching the whiteout consume the world. They couldn't see the car in front of them. They couldn't see the guardrails. All they could hear was the wind howling like a jet engine. the gravel-like sound of ice pelting the metal of their doors. Minutes turned into hours. The gas gauges began to drop. The heat began to fade. The snow crept up the tires, reaching the hubcaps, then the door handles. It sealed the cars in. Thousands of motorists realized with dawning horror that they were not going home. They were trapped in a frozen tomb of steel and glass. On I-75 in Ohio, the scene was apocalyptic. The wind used the open highway as a runway. Semi-trucks, massive 18-wheelers weighing tons, were tossed aside like toys. They jackknifed across all lanes, forming walls of metal that completely blocked the escape routes. The drifts began to build against these trucks, rising 10, 15, 20 feet high. Inside the cars, the psychological toll was immense. There was no Google Maps to show.
Dude, this would have been awful to deal with. Like, I'd feel so helpless. You're sat in your car, you've got no food, you're freezing cold, you can't keep your engine running forever, you know. I just feel like, man, how am I going to get out of this? Like, you literally just have to wait out the storm. Like, any of you guys that were, you know, that dealt with this, how was it? It must have been awful.
Red line of traffic. There was no Twitter to see if help was coming. There was only the static of the AM radio, where panic-stricken voices tried to make sense of the chaos. People had to make a life or death choice. Do you stay in the car? It offered shelter from the wind, but as the snow buried the exhaust pipes, the silent killer, carbon monoxide, began to seep into the cabins. People simply fell asleep and never woke up. Or do you walk? Do you open the door, step out into a whiteout where you can't see your hand in front of your face, and try to find shelter? Many chose to walk. They tethered themselves together with scarves and jumper cables, forming human chains, stumbling blindly toward the faint, hazy glow of house lights in the distance. They abandoned their cars, their Pontiacs, their Buicks, their Chevys, leaving them as monuments in the snow. Those who lived near the highways became accidental heroes. They saw the headlights disappearing into the drifts and opened their doors. Strangers took in dozens of refugees. Living room floors became triage centers. People were pulled from their cars.
Oh, look at his hands. Is that frostbite? Oh my God, look at the state of this dude's fingers.
Frostbitten and terrified, and given coffee and blankets by people they had never met. But on the road, the silence descended. As the engines died one by one, the highway, the symbol of American freedom and movement, became a graveyard. As the sun went down, though you couldn't see the sun, only a gray, swirling void that faded into pitch black, the siege moved to the homes. The storm wasn't done with the roads. Now it came for the houses. The power grid was the first casualty, battered by hurricane-force winds and weighed down by inches of heavy ice. The lines snapped. Transformers exploded in blue-green flashes that lit up the blinding snow for a split second before plunging entire counties into darkness. In 1978, houses...
This is awful. This is a nightmare. Like, definitely seems like this was more catastrophic than the ones that we saw yesterday and today that's still going on. Like, just in terms of the actual, how badly it really affected people. These ones are still bad, the ones that are going on now, but this feels like worse, 1978. Would you agree with that?
Weren't insulated like they are today. We didn't have triple pane windows or high efficiency foam. When the furnace died, the cold didn't knock, it kicked the door down. Inside, the temperature began to drop. 60 degrees, 50 degrees, 40. You could see your breath in the bedroom. Water pipes burst in the walls, sounding like gunshots, flooding basements that then froze solid, cracking the foundations. Families retreated. They abandoned the bedrooms and the upper floors. They huddled in a single room, usually the kitchen or the living room with a fireplace. They hung blankets over the doorways to trap what little heat they had. They pulled mattresses off the beds and laid them on the floor in front of the fire. You simply endured. There was no choice but to survive. The food supply became a sudden obsession. The grocery stores were closed. The roads were gone. You had what was in your pantry, and that was it. It became a war of attrition. Families opened cans of Campbell's soup and heated them on top of wood stoves. They ate cold beans. They raided the freezer, realizing that the food inside was now warmer than the air outside.
That is insane. That's crazy.
And the noise. The noise was relentless. The wind didn't stop for days. It battered the siding.
I just can't believe it's able to like rip massive trees out of their roots. You know, the power it takes to pull a tree this big. Look how big this tree is compared to the car. It has ripped it clean out, roots and all.
It shook the shingles. It sounded like a freight train was parked on the roof. The house groaned under the weight of the snow. For those 3 days, the isolation was total. You couldn't open your front door,
Wow.
not because it was locked, but because a 10-foot drift of snow was packed against it like concrete. You were sealed in. People had to crawl out of second-story windows just to check the vents or to see if the world was still there. The radio became the lifeline. In the darkness, huddled under piles of quilts, families listened to the local DJs who stayed on the air for 24, 48, 72 hours straight. They read lists of open shelters. They took calls from people trapped in their homes. They became the voice of the storm.
Yeah, it must have been so lonely. There's no social media, no cell phones, no way of like just hearing other people. You know, like the isolation must have been one of the worst aspects of it. 3 days of not hearing, seeing another person if you live alone.
The only proof that civilization hadn't completely ended. But inside that struggle, there was a divide. A stark difference in perspective. For the adults, the blizzard of '78 was a catastrophe. It was a battle for heat, for oil, for food. It was the fear of the roof collapsing. It was the anxiety of a paycheck missed. It was the terror of not knowing if the car abandoned on the highway was crushed or stolen. But for the kids, it was Narnia. It was Hoth. It was absolute magic. School was canceled, not just for a snow day, but for a week, sometimes two. The snowdrifts weren't obstacles. They were architecture. The wind had sculpted the snow into hard-packed waves that you could walk on without sinking.
Wow.
Kids didn't see the danger. They
He's having the time of his life. Look at this guy.
saw opportunity. They put on their snowsuits, those one-piece nylon suits that made a swish-swish sound when you walked, and they climbed out the windows. They sledded off the roofs of their garages because the snow was piled so high, it created a perfect ramp. They dug tunnels, elaborate multi-room tunnel systems through the front yards. They created caves where the wind couldn't reach them, lit by the ethereal blue light filtering through the snowpack. To a 10-year-old in 1978, the blizzard wasn't a disaster. It was the greatest adventure of their lives. They walked to the local convenience store, pulling sleds behind them, on a mission to get milk or bread for their parents. They walked down the middle of main streets that were usually filled with traffic, now silent canyons of white. They ruled the world. The adults were paralyzed by the snow, but the kids were liberated by it. They didn't see the fear in their parents' eyes as the woodpile dwindled.
It's just funny. Like, I'm imagining all these kids having so much fun, but the parents can't get to work or anything like that. The parents are panicking while the kids are just like having a blast.
only saw a world transformed into a playground of ice. By the third day, the reality of the situation forced a different kind of response. The local police and fire departments were overwhelmed. Their cruisers were buried. Their engines were frozen. The mayors and governors realized they had lost control of their territory. They called in the cavalry. The National Guard was mobilized. This wasn't a deployment to fight a riot or a war. It was a deployment to fight the drifts.
Wow.
It was a surreal sight. In suburban neighborhoods of Boston and Cleveland, M60 tanks and armored personnel carriers rolled down the streets. The rumble of their tracks shook the frozen ground. They were the only vehicles capable of crushing the snow. They weren't looking for insurgents. They were delivering bread. Soldiers in full winter gear rode on the backs of trucks, handing out gallons of milk and prescription medicine to elderly people trapped in their homes. Helicopters landed in high school football fields to evacuate heart attack victims. It was called Operation Snowdrop in some places, a full-scale military mission to save civilians from their own weather.
It's crazy thinking that the army needed to be brought in to fight the weather. You know, that just shows how serious it must have been. 3 days, I suppose, especially when, there was way less technology available to people. ways of like staying fed, warm and all that. I get it. But the army had to get involved.
But the military couldn't be everywhere, and this is where the true spirit of the blizzard revealed itself. The snowmobiles became the citizen navy. In towns across New England and the Midwest, anyone who owned a snowmobile became a first responder. These weren't government employees. They were just guys from the neighborhood.
Wow.
They organized themselves into rescue squads. They ferried doctors to hospitals, weaving through the buried cars on the highway. They carried police officers to crime scenes. They brought insulin to diabetics and baby formula to panicked mothers.
That's amazing. People helping out, you know. It's great to see. When people come together like this, we could do so much.
They strapped toboggans to the back of their sleds and moved groceries, firewood, and people. For a week, the laws of the road didn't apply. The snowmobile was king. It was the American spirit distilled to its essence. When the system breaks, the people step up, and the neighbors. There was no social media to post a status asking for help. You had to physically check on your neighbor. And people did. They put on their snowshoes and trekked next door. If you had a wood stove and your neighbor didn't, your house became the neighborhood shelter. Strangers slept on living room floors. People shared what little they had: cans of tuna, candles, batteries. If a car was stuck, 10 people appeared out of the mist to push it. There was no money exchanged. There was no hesitation. The adversity stripped away the superficial barriers of society. In the face of the storm, everyone was equal. Everyone was cold, and everyone needed each other. When the storm finally broke and the low-pressure system moved out to sea, the sun came out. It glared off the blinding white landscape with an intensity that hurt the eyes. The silence was broken.
Look at all of these cars. Wow. This is crazy. Just stuck there, and you can tell it's going all the way back. It's probably going for miles.
By the sound of shovels. The cleanup began. It wasn't just shoveling. It was excavation. It was archaeology. We dug out cars that looked like igloos, having to guess which lump of snow was a Volkswagen and which was a mailbox. We found roads that had been missing for a week. The sheer volume of snow was staggering. 27 inches in Boston, nearly 40 in parts of Rhode Island. But the drifts made those numbers meaningless.
Wow, look at that. Hang on, sorry. Just look at this mountain of snow on either side of this car.
Meaningless. Drifts reached the traffic lights. Drifts buried the first floor of houses. And as the snow was cleared, the tragedy was revealed. The bodies were found in the cars on the highway.
God.
People who had just gone to sleep and never woken up.
Oh
the
my
toll
God.
was grim. Nearly 100 people died in Massachusetts and Rhode Island alone.
100?
The economy had paralyzed. Businesses lost millions. Roofs of arenas and warehouses collapsed under the weight. It took weeks for life to return to normal. The snow didn't fully melt until May in some shady corners. The Great Blizzard of 1978 changed us. It taught a generation to respect the sky. It exposed the fragility of our modern systems, how quickly the highways can close, how fast the power can die, how thin the veneer of civilization really is when the temperature drops. But it also revealed our strength. We remember it not just for the records broken or the tragedy of the lives lost, but for the way we huddled together in the dark, waiting for the plow. It was the storm that buried America.
Wow, 100 people. That's a lot. I didn't think it'd be that much. Like, I know that, you know, they said, the narrator said that there were casualties. I was thinking maybe 10, 20. 100 is a lot. There's not a lot of events that have taken, like natural events, when it comes to, like, you know, hurricanes, tornadoes, that have taken this many people. It's just awful that many people died. Just shows how bad it must have been, how awful it must have been to, like, be in your car or even being at home. Like, you know, you would have thought being at home would be the best case scenario here. You're home, you've got food, you've got shelter, you've got your clothes there. But, you know, being stuck in your house for 3, 4, 5 days without being able to go outside and get more provisions must have been terrible. Really want to hear from you guys. If any of you guys were alive back then that had to deal with this, love to know what it was like. You know, I want to hear your experiences. Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed the video, I'm going to link a very similar one right below, and I'll see you there.